Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world. Hi, and welcome to our next episode of Decoding AQ. Very excited, as I always am, as you know, for our regular listeners, to invite somebody who I came across only a few weeks ago. And I had the privilege and pleasure to attend Julie's session on resilience. So welcome, Julie Hutchinson from Austin in Texas. And your focus and area is all around managing stress and overwhelm. So what a great topic and a great piece. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Great. So one of the things that I found fascinating, and it's always this balance when I'm interviewing people and throughout their lives, is between where their backgrounds come from, where science has showed up and this thirst to try and understand things, and then how we can practically apply them to get an outcome that we want. So it might be a decrease in stress or an increase in energy or productivity, or for many companies, just profits. You know, what is it that they're trying to deal with that might be hidden inside some science that we can then actually put into our regular practices, put into our routines, put into our systems in organizations through training and awareness. So why don't we just start off, Julie, with a little bit of your background and context, which is an interesting story, but why don't you share a little bit of that for everyone?
Sure. I was a serial entrepreneur for a while, and I was invited many years ago now, I think it was about 15 years ago, to join a company that was just launching by the name of Somnio Solutions. So we were an early adventure going out to create, it was a creative services agency. And I joined the team in the early stages. We decided not to go out for funding. We were going to bootstrap the company, and we said we were going to work with the biggest companies in the world. At that time, it was the IBM, 3M, Dell, Hewlett Packard, and I was in charge of sales. So it was my job to get us on the vendor list of all those companies, which I did. And we ended up on the Inc.'s 5,000 fastest growing companies. And all of that sounds amazing and wonderful, which it was. However, it was at the expense of my health, because I was so focused on achieving those goals. We've got to be on the Inc.'s 5,000 fastest growing companies. Let's meet these revenue targets. And so being focused on that, I was willing to be on planes every single week, just going. And I got really burnt out and ended up going to the doctor. And he said, your adrenals are shot, your cortisol levels are through the roof. You may want to consider quitting your job or getting on medication. None of those were an option for me. So I had to figure out, how do I do my job without burning out in the process? So I went on a self-discovery journey, and that's what led me to where I am today.
I'm sure many can resonate with that kind of experience. You know, we pursue a goal often through our naivety and youth that we don't realize the cost of that pursuit. You know, we're so wrapped up in the excitement and the kick and the chemical rush of the wins, of the progress, of, you know, in your case, winning the contracts, getting in front of the people, getting the sales, drives us to a point where actually we're neglecting just some of the basic functions of our body. And often it's downstream and later when certain symptoms, you know, show up, and failure of being in harmony with our body says, excuse me, Julie, you know, excuse me, this isn't something we can sustain. And many need that burning platform, that moment, to maybe then reflect. And I think what's been great from the little I saw of your experiences, you're wanting to try and get upstream to that for people. You don't need to think you've got to be so burnt out and stressed in order to achieve success. How can we go further back there before that happens to put in some regulations and approaches that isn't about, you need to be less ambitious.
Right.
If you want to be on that list or in this place, then that's the ticket price. Doesn't have to be like that. So I guess over the last, over a decade, you've now been focusing on that shift of the core performance of people, maybe without the sacrifice of having to go through those situations. So when was there that moment for you of that realization where a practitioner said, Julie, you need to do option A or B, medicate or quit. Was that a critical moment for you that changed things? Tell me what happened next.
It was a critical moment because what I realized in that moment is, oh my gosh, I never had thought I would be put in a category of burned out or get on high blood pressure medicine or anti-anxiety medicine. I just was never that kind of person. I was always an athlete. I exercised and I thought that I was taking good care of myself. And I think that was the challenge. In my mind, I was taking good care of myself because I was a runner, I was a triathlete. However, I was burning myself out in a whole different way that I didn't quite understand. And so when I was given those ultimatums, so to speak, I said, you know what? I don't like any of those options. And that's when I turned to a different direction and started the journey.
And for some people, that can change the direction and you do something else. You actually then formed from your entrepreneurial kind of experience a whole proposition of then seeking to solve that same challenge that you faced for others.
Yes.
And why was that? What was that? Because you could have solved it in many other ways. But then to go, no, this now is my future. It's my passion. It's my calling. And you've spent a lot of time in research, a lot of time building your own curriculum of how to deal with that and then sharing it with people. Why was that?
Well, I'll first share with you it was a selfish motivation when it started. The selfish motivation was I love the track I'm on, I love this company, and I'd love to really blow it out of the water to the next level. So it was very much a selfish motivation. And then when I started the journey, I learned to meditate. I became a yoga instructor. I went with sort of the softer side of adventure sports, if you will. And what really opened my eyes is when I started shifting on the inside, the way I think, the way I feel, the way my body operated, and that started changing my outside world. My relationships started to change. Life became easier. And as I started to do that, I was like, wait a minute, I'm shifting who I am at a fundamental level, and it's being reflected back to me. And so the aha moment for me was, oh, here I was leading sales, and it was all about goals and strategy and how are we going to do this presentation. And the shift for me happened was that's only a fraction of how to work. The bigger piece is my beliefs, my thoughts, how I'm being, the way I see the world, how I'm showing up. And when I had that moment and my body started to shift, and then I started to learn how to literally biohack my physiology when I was feeling stressed and overwhelmed, which would change the way my brain thinks, I would become more creative. I was like, wow, this is a turning point. And what ended up happening is sales even went through the roof on a bigger level. My relationships got better because I was kind of the girl in the relationship that would leave if I wasn't happy. And I was very driven. And I'll be quite honest, I had an anger streak, a type A personality. And when all that started to shift and change and I became softer and more present, that's when I realized, wow, I can go teach this to other people. There's actually science-backed ways to teach how to be. We're human beings, not human doings. And I was doing all the time. And so I started focus on the being, and that shifted everything. So it was a big turning point for me.
And so that sense of being, maybe having space to be the best version of yourself, allowed you to make different decisions, to, as you said, think differently, feel differently. And it started with self-discovery. So it started with, how do I figure out and fix what I've broken? And when doing that, realize that you could transcend to a different level of achievement and of what life represented for you. And I wonder, before we dive into, okay, so what were the things that you were doing and how have you biohacked your own physiology, is in the last decade or so, with the different people you've worked with, different teams you've worked with, what have been some of the other indicators that people may be feeling? Because it isn't always needing the end of burnout, need this ultimatum. How could people recognize it a bit earlier? So give us a few of the signals that you've seen with clients and seen with teams that might be earlier indicators that they could catch it early. And then let's dive into what can we do about this? You know, if we want to really find ourselves less stress, find ourselves with more energy, more creativity, then I can't wait to dive in that. But just give us an idea of what comes a little bit before from your observations.
Sure. One of the main things is, and you said this a little earlier, you talked about the chemical rush. And so when we're working, our bodies get used to like a stress state or the chemical rush of closing a deal. And if you don't get that deal closing and you don't get that chemical rush, you're going to find it somewhere else. And that may show up as drama. It may show up as, oh, that anxiety, that overwhelm. So if you find that you're addicted to some sort of chemical rush, like I got to get that win so that I feel better and so that I have more energy, that's one indication. Another indication is if that chemical rush causes something in your body to have you tense up. So maybe you do a chemical rush of the anxiety, like I'm in overwhelm right now. That's what I'm used to in that chemical rush. If you notice maybe tension in your neck, your shoulders, when you start to feel the tension in your body, that's another indication. The other thing too is if you're not sleeping, that's a huge indication. If you're waking up in the middle of the night and you can't seem to go back to sleep, your mind's chattering, you can't turn off the mind, that's another indication. And I'll say one more that I'm starting to find to be a lot more common is people will have a to-do list and they may be working and having this to-do list and then their mind is like, I don't want to do this anymore. And they switch to something where they can have a quick win and get that hit, that chemical rush of the win. So if you find that you're jumping to different tasks quite a bit and you're not able to stay focused, that's another indication.
What's causing those things at the root level? What's malfunctioning? Because as we've used this chemical rush, and we are an addict to certain things that can be corrosive or positive. I mean, one addict of a workaholic has been for a long time socially acceptable. But the realities of again, at what costs? What's the cause of some of those things that are making us feel tense in the shoulder, that are seeking us to shift what we're doing in tasks because we're putting things off that we don't like, or we're not sleeping? What is the root of that?
Well, the root of it starts with thoughts and beliefs. Thoughts and beliefs lead to emotions. So if you have a thought, I'm always overwhelmed, why can't I get this done? There's typically an emotion that comes with that. And let's just use, for example, frustration. When you begin to say that and feel that, the body moves into a state called incoherence. The autonomic nervous system is kind of jagged, if you will. And it's off, think about it like the gas pedal is on and the brake pedal is on at the same time. And it's just not functioning very well. What ends up happening, our brain is a storage of its patterns and recognitions. Like our brain stores certain things, our bodies start to store certain things. So if we're used to living in the frustration, the overwhelm, the burnout, the body gets used to it. And I love to use the analogy of the temperature on a wall. So if you think about, you set your temperature at 70 degrees, and then it gets to about 73 degrees, the AC kicks on, cools the room down to 68, AC goes off. So it's going to fluctuate between 68 and 73. We start to have a temperature in our bodies and our brains. And that temperature could be overwhelm and frustration. But what I find with a lot of my clients is, yeah, I'm running overwhelm and frustration underneath the surface, but I'm a high achiever. So I'm driven and I got my strategy down and I can make things happen, but I'm really feeling overwhelmed and frustrated. And that's when that burnout starts to happen. That's when they end up with those chronic disease states, stomach issues, headaches, can't sleep. But on the outside, everybody's looking at them going, well, you just seem to have it all together. You got things going on. You're very efficient. You're doing all this. But what's happening underneath the surface is what's really, really important.
Is that out of balance sense of the coherence in the way that our body operates, and we
Yes.
become used to it. Is what you're saying, in the fact that that's just maybe even becomes part of our identity. You mentioned a couple of things that resonated with me because of conversations I've had in the past, people who seek drama, because that's how they've been wired, and that's what part
Yeah.
of it is, and it becomes part of the identity, and it perpetuates. And the piece about the foot on the accelerator and brake is actually a narrative we use in part of our reporting of our tool.
Oh, how
And
fun.
you know what, Julie, that has had so many people say, that just so hit me square in the face. That was me, and it is that reality of being aware. And I think it leads us to, you talk about some essential shifts people can make when they're noticing these things. If you've been listening and I hold myself a bit tense, or I'm struggling to sleep, or it's got so bad that you're now maybe having stomach issues, IBS, all sorts of things that are, these chronic effects of being in that state for too long. How can we start to reset it? How can we start to get then a practice in which we are capable of dealing with those external factors by having ourselves in a ready state, in a coherence of those things? So walk us through perhaps some of those shifts. I know that you shared with me before these 4 shifts, but it'd be great to dive into those, Julie.
Sure. I'll start with shift number one. Shift number one is you got to have awareness of your body and how stress shows up in your body. Oftentimes we ignore it and we think that's just part of getting old. That's the price I pay for success. That irritable bowel syndrome, that stomach problem, the tension in my neck, I'll just go get some medication for that. What ends up happening is when we don't have awareness of it, it ends up getting worse and worse and worse. So the step number one, have awareness of how does that stress show up in your body. And then step number two is when you have that awareness, now become the observer of your thoughts. What thought was I just thinking that led to this tension in my neck? What story am I telling myself? Oftentimes, and this goes into step number two, oftentimes the thought or the story that we're telling ourselves has a negative or depleting emotion that goes with it. I'll give you an example. Why can't I ever seem to figure this out? Am I ever going to stop the overwhelm? Am I ever going to get a good night's sleep? I can't seem to do this. The I can't, the overwhelm, we are saying this language to ourselves of why can't I? It's too hard. When you, and anybody that's listening to this, I'm just going to have you say that to yourselves right now, and then close your eyes for a second and just say, I can't, or it's too hard. Notice where that shows up in your body. And everybody that's doing that right now may be saying, well, for some, it shows up in my throat or my back or my stomach. We're all going to manifest this in a different area of our bodies. So when you have that awareness, this is the thought I was thinking, this is how it shows up, then you can upgrade your language. So anytime we say, I can't do this, the body shuts down. And what's also happening is you're feeding your subconscious mind. The subconscious is 90% of the brain's activity. The conscious mind has choice. We can make those choices, but if we're conscious of the words that we're using, and you shift to, I choose to make this fun and easy, or I can figure this out. So for those that experimented with the words I can't or it's too hard, now I'm going to invite you to say, I can, or I choose to make this easy. Notice if you feel that differently in your body. And typically what happens is people, when they move from I can'ts to I cans, They can breathe easier. I can brings more oxygen into the body. So that's the second shift, is upgrade your language. Notice it. If it's depleting, upgrade it to things like I can, I will, I choose, I have, I love, I enjoy. Anytime you start a thought with those, I can, I am, I will, I choose, I enjoy, you're automatically upgrading your language. So those are the first two steps. And then the
Can I
third,
offer a thought, just as you've been
sure.
thinking, because it references quite strongly a piece of research in my book, and a element of the languages you were talking about, of this negative bias that we have, and that's how we're wired. And it's often the challenge. We can, in the moment, and with your help, Julie, we can go, I can't, I can, and we can do those things, but that's creating a new pathway that we're not familiar with. And so in the moment, in the dark, in the stress, we'll come back to the familiar that is a well-trodden path of I can't. And
Yes.
it's almost the energy required that is a transformational change to go from, say, a negative to a positive. What I've found is a couple of pieces of just a shift of maybe decoupling the negative from being associated with you. So a bit like, I'm frustrated, to I'm feeling frustrated. So it's not me who's frustrated. It's not my identity. It's not myself. The frustration is a separate entity,
Yes.
and that is passing through me. And as you said earlier, I'm an observer of those emotions. And so I'm feeling frustrated is maybe half the relax, and now I'm feeling free, the positive, or frustrated, I'm feeling clear, I'm whatever the flip is, I can't think right now, but is that maybe there's a place where there's a bit of middle ground if you're struggling in those moments, that might decouple you from that negative emotion being I am frustrated to I'm feeling frustrated, or I am stressed to I'm feeling stressed, and then link to, I'm going to be stress free, or I'm feeling clear, or I've got time or freedom or in control, or I choose. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, of whether you've come across similar things, what it makes you think of, before we go to the next big one, which is the coherence bit that we teased earlier. But what's your thoughts about that transition period of language?
Really beautiful distinction. I love that you brought that up, because we cultivate an identity. And when we say, I am stressed or I am frustrated, we're solidifying that identity, which I'm sure a lot of people would rather not have that. And so when you decouple that or say, I'm feeling this, feeling is passing through me. I like to say emotions are energy in motion. That's what an emotion is. It's energy and it's in motion. So I'm feeling frustrated, and my choice is to feel calm. Now you're not saying, this is my identity, this is who I am. So great distinction. Love that.
So dive into coherence. What is it? What's this
Sure.
word? What's this term? And how can we harness it? How can we leverage it? And yeah, share some more.
Well, it's a great transition with the feeling piece of it. And I like to call the coherence as a secret weapon, because this is the thing that people don't talk about. Like when I went to the doctor for this, never was there a word mentioned about coherence. And coherence really means when the body is in sync and balance. All the systems, immune system, cardiovascular system, nervous system, is functioning in a state of energetic coordination. People might know that as flow. There's probably a lot of listeners like, oh yeah, I get into flow on the golf course, or when I'm doing some sports, I can get into flow, or when I'm riding. But I always say, well, do you know how you got there? And they typically say, oh, I had a good night's sleep, or I was really present, but I don't know if I can repeat that. Coherence is the scientifically proven way to get into the state of flow. And it really, the secret of coherence is the feeling piece of it. And here's why. Because scientists used to think that the brain was like the master switch for the body. The way you think sends everything else to the body and tells the body what to do. It's not the brain, it's the heart. And this is what they proved about 2 decades ago, that the heart is the master organ in the body. Now, some fun little tidbit is that the heart is the first thing that is developed in utero. So if you think about that, the heart contains all the information for the body to grow and to create the bones and the nervous system and the eyes and the ears and all that stuff. So the heart has its own intuitive intelligence. Now here's the key. When we are feeling frustrated and we've set that temperature, oftentimes unconsciously, of frustration, the heart is beating like this. It's boom, 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 really, really fast. And it's what we call an incoherent signal. Think about this as the gas. If we looked at this on a biofeedback device, it would be this jagged, incoherent frequency. So when we say, I'm feeling frustrated and my choice is to feel calm, when you can literally move from the feeling of frustration to calm, there are 1,400 biochemical changes that happen in the body just by changing one emotion. That's how powerful the heart is. Now, those 1,400 biochemical changes, we don't feel all of those, but it shows up as tension in my neck or my stomach. It's all these things that are coming out in the body, and we feel that as some irritation in the body. So coherence is when you can move into a state where the brain and the heart are in alignment, meaning that I feel calm, I am calm, and you literally go into the feeling of calm, you can move the body into a state of coherence. So it's aligning head with heart, sending a coherent frequency, because 90% of the information from the heart travels to the brain through the vagus nerve. So if you're sending this beautiful coherent signal to the brain, now the brain can operate more efficiently. So it's the whole body, all the systems of the body are tied together. And when you can move it from incoherence to coherence, you're now in flow. And this is the step-by-step technique that we teach people to get into on a daily basis, moment by moment, if they can.
And you talked earlier about, you released a new level of creativity. And it's interesting because when we have that jagged sense going up to the brain, we've closed off a lot of the other components and compartments of the brain. We're not able to access them. It's when we're in reaction mode. As you said, I've got an anger streak. It shows up in reaction, not in response. So when we have that clear signal, we've allowed our brain to be in neutral, to be in flow, to unlock and to respond. So we can sense new things, we can think new things, we can observe new things. And that shows up as creativity, better decision making, because we're not decision making under stress is actually impaired decision making from the sense of how you're functioning, what you're describing. And so this correlation and these linkages between negative outcomes of overwhelm and stress or positive outcomes of increase of energy or productivity or creativity is factored by the way in which we're allowing the brain to function. So if we're shutting it off, we are half ourselves. If we're getting into that state, flow state, all of these things, who knows what we could achieve? Who knows what we're capable of when the majority of our time we're living in an impaired modality because of the negative, and the language is so crucial to our mindset. You said it starts with beliefs and thoughts. We agree and feel the same thing. Our mindset that's fed from those inputs goes through the process and gets an outcome. Basic behavioral organizational psychology of input, process, outcome. So the next bit I'm really interested in. So we can be made aware of these. You've listened to it and you've gone, right, okay, I've got to be aware. So I've got to ask myself some good questions. I've got to have space for that. Right. Okay. I've got to upgrade my language. Right. I can do that. Coherence. Okay. So I get it. Well, there might be practical steps, and your program helps with that, whether it's breathing, other pieces that help you get into coherence. But then there's another magic fourth shift that perhaps helps us when we are, out of our lane. what keeps us on track when we're at our dark side, when we're struggling. Because on a good day, we're good. We can follow those things. On a bad day, it all goes out the window. And so share with us the fourth piece that I think is the real multiplier to all of these, to any kind of human shift, to any kind of change that we're trying to do, is the fourth one. So share that with us, Julie, because I think it is just magic.
It is the key to the human shift, and that's invest in coaching. And if you think about it, any great athlete has a coach. Any great performer has a coach. And what I mean by that is coaching brings several things, actually. One is accountability. Because like you said, when you're having a great day, it's easy. But when you're having a bad day, it's not so easy. And so, and regardless of what coach it is, find a coach that works for you, because it brings in accountability and community as well. So good coaches typically have community of other people that have gone through the step-by-step process that you want to achieve, and community keeps you going. The accountability is key, because what we find is that if people say, okay, I have a destination to reduce my stress by 50%, and they don't have a step-by-step proven process to do that, and they're just going out and watching YouTube videos and exercising and eating a little bit differently, oftentimes they're going to fall off the wagon. It's just human nature. So coaching with somebody who has a step-by-step proven system to bring in accountability and to hold you to your goals and your achievements is what is key. That can get you there very fast. And I can tell you that whatever your goal may be, when you find the right system, it can get you there very quickly. It's not a long system. So for example, when I take somebody on that is willing to do the work and they like to reduce their stress, we can get outcomes in 8 weeks. As little as 8 weeks, you can literally decrease stress, anxiety, and overwhelm by up to 53% in 8 weeks, and then it just gets exponentially better from there.
And it's interesting because we talked right at the beginning, as we sort of wrap up, this balance between internal and external, doing the work on ourselves, doing the work on others, being aware of what our own self-talk, our own language, our own thoughts, our own actions, how they manifest in ourselves, but also the effect that it has on others. And I'm sure many people have experienced the fact that when they're around certain people, it shifts who they are. You can be around some people that are just so calming, other people that just get you all tense. And we have this viral effect of passing emotional states, passing, in our realm, a whole big area of measuring adaptability is environmental factors. And what's interesting is this balance between what are our own skills, what are the practices, skills like mindset is a skill. It is trainable, it's learnable to become comfortable in the uncomfortable, to cope in uncertainty, all of these things around adaptability. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that we found, because I think it's so aligned to some of the work that you do and research. So we last year took a sample size from our data set. We had, I think it was last August, and we took over 2,000 user data on our AQ assessment. And we were looking at correlations, and we measure work stress. And there were 3 of the other dimensions that had a correlation to reduce work stress. And the number one was emotional health. And the emotional health of what we're looking at is referring to the degree in which someone is experiencing a sense of thriving at work, i.e., do they have positive moments? And that's linked to the language of, am I experiencing positive experiences? Is there times when actually the health around me is negative, or is it positive? So that emotional health was the first. The second was resilience. And so their level of resilience, so as their resilience increases, work stress decreases. Exactly as you said, go on the program, 8 weeks, we can have you 53% down. And on our data of measurement, we can see those correlations between them. And the other one is also then what I think is important for leaders to recognize that whilst we can, some of us benefit from coaching, we have the time, the resource, we will invest in it. We're working, and many people are, to make that more accessible, to democratize coaching. How can everyone access that? But as a leader, one of the other things that was important for reducing stress in our data was the work environment. What I mean by that is, what are the systems, process, and methodologies that are around you? So whilst you can do deep work, you can do coaching, what are the things that you have in the way what's your way of operating as a business that is either inhibiting or accelerating people's stress responses? So what are their experimentations? How do you cultivate things like psychological safety so that they aren't being judged? All of those factors are what we found correlate really strongly with a reduction in stress. And I think your 4 steps and program align beautifully with that. So I think it's a great opportunity for people who have identified a risk. We identify high grit can actually be negative in some cases because it increases your likelihood of stress, that they can come and engage with programs like yours to now what I can do when I know these things. I've become aware, not just, well, I've asked my questions, you've had a conversation and you've got some data from it. You can now engage with your kind of program. So I was just interested in, because of course everyone has a slight tweak on the certain language or understanding or frameworks of different terms from a science base. But I'd love to hear your reflections and thoughts on that data that I've just shared.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that data, and I feel that it's spot on. One of the things when you talk about number one is emotional health, it really is the key. So much so that several years ago, the Surgeon General of the United States, Vivek Murthy was his name at the time, he felt that emotional health was so important, he wanted to bring it forward as a pillar of health in America. Because we've got physical health, we have mental health, but nobody was talking about emotional health. So as part of a small committee that went up there with Marianne Williamson and a couple of other people to really bring emotional health forward as a pillar of health in America. And what we know about that is when your emotions, is like what we were talking about in Coherence, emotions are stronger than thoughts. When we talk about how we affect other people around us, there's something called the torus field. And the torus field can be measured scientifically 8 feet in front of us. And with 75% accuracy, they use an instrument that can tell you what emotional state that you're in. So if they use this instrument, they could say, you're feeling blue today, or you're feeling frustrated, or you're feeling happy. That's with 75% accuracy. So that's what science is showing us. Now we know that if you're sitting in a meeting and somebody walks in and they're not very happy, you're like, whoa, I don't want to be around them. You can sense it. This is why. Now the way the heart beating is affecting those emotions. So emotional intelligence is to me, it's the foundational piece. And it does build resilience. So your number 2 was the level of resilience. One of the things that was posed to me many, many years ago was actually from a general in the U.S. Army, General Rhonda Cornum. And she wanted to find out, why is it that when 2 soldiers in the same platoon get into, they call it theater when you go to war, when they go to war, why is it that when those 2 soldiers come back, one can come back with severe PTSD and the other one doesn't? And can you train for it? Well, what we proved, we did a lot of science and a lot of training with men and women in uniform, and we proved that resilience can be trained for. And the reason that you can train for it is because resilience is directly correlated with the autonomic nervous system and the coherence level in the nervous system. So that's that temperature on the wall. You've got 2 soldiers that are coming into the military and they've had a rough background and they're running in that anxiety or anger. We can shift that to peace and calm. And now the nervous system is balanced more, so they're less susceptible from being influenced by the effects of war. Now take that into corporations, wherever you are in the world. If you have a resilient employee, and one that's not that resilient, and they go into a chaotic environment or culture that's not doing very well, the person that's more resilient, automatically, that they step in more resilient, they're going to perform better. The one that's not, because their nervous system is out of balance, they're going to have that inhibition in their thinking. They're not going to be as creative. They're going to be sick more. They're going to not be at work as much. They're going to be absent a lot more. So resilience is key. And that is something you can change your level of resilience. And then the work environment.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. I'm so conscious of time, but I'm really into this. And thank you, Julie, for bringing in so many interesting thoughts. So we have various sayings, and the sayings exist for a reason, right? You know, the bad apple in the cart, all of these bits. So if we have this aura and we have this area where, you know, our brains have a, as you mentioned, subconscious that takes up most of the thinking, most of the energy, and our cell intelligence that can sense our environment around of other people, and that, okay, we can measure 75% accuracy what someone's feeling with a scientific instrument. I'm sure so can our cell intelligence of our bodies. And we might not understand it, we might not know it, but it shows up as, I want to hang out with that person, or I want to run away from them. You know, I like being with them, or I don't like being with them. They make me feel good. I'm more creative when I'm around certain people. So in that same sense of how are we affecting others and in team performance, and it's why they found the research of what is the biggest driver of this great resignation: toxic work cultures. And so that toxic work culture that has this aura of energy around it, that we're then in that state, that negative state, something we don't like, and it shows up: tension, you know, bellyache, all of these bits. My last question, I've got two more questions because I always have the same question at the end. But before that, on this same subject, what do you think the effect is of now a lot of people shifting to remote working? So one of the things I've had many conversations is just how cognitively challenging it is to have Zoom after Zoom, because we're not getting all that cell intelligence of the body language, the energy of how someone's feeling. And we're working so hard to figure it out on this little screen where I'm watching Julian going, oh yeah, she's smiling, she's nodding. Okay, we're good, we're still good. She's not nodded off, you know. And we're trying to work so hard with that. We haven't got those other feedback. So that can be maybe positive if that one person is giving off such negative energy and I'm behind a screen, I might not get so much. Or can I still transfer that energy? Because I give lots of keynotes, lots of talks, and I find it so hard to get the energy and feel the energy when it's via Zoom in a room where you've got thousands of people and you're really there. And I'm trying to, I've got a standing desk and I'll put it up there and I'm trying to do that, but it's so hard. So I'm just fascinated with this challenge around, resilience, coherence, team dynamics, emotional health in this virtual world. And maybe we'll have a part 2, Julie, and we'll go into what's going on in the virtual world, Zoom, let alone the metaverse, of how we're dealing with these same subjects and these same things of resilience, of stress, of what's increasing it, what's decreasing it, and how do we need to maybe shift some of that playbook when we're in these different environments, virtual environments. So perhaps just give us a 5-minute hit of your response to that, and I'll see if I can convince Julie to come back for part 2, and we'll go on that.
I'm going to give you an answer from a science perspective.
Cool. Yeah.
So one of the things that we do is we have the Resilient Transformation Academy, and we bring leaders and executives into it, and they come into this community, and we do Zoom calls. Now, on the Zoom call that we have, it's part of the coaching piece of it. On the Zoom call, we all have a biofeedback device that measures our coherence level. What we do is we practice individually getting into a state of coherence, and then we do a technique once we're in coherence. Now, granted, these people are all over the world, right? So we get into coherence, and then we say, okay, now our eyes are closed, biofeedback's measuring the level of coherence, and we say, now imagine that you're taking your individual coherence and you're sending it to everybody on this Zoom call. And then on the next inhale breath, you're receiving it back. So as a group, We are sharing coherence through the Zoom call, all different parts of the world. And just about, I would say 90% of the people, if they're really doing the work, it will measure on their device that their level of
An
coherence
uplift.
increases drastically.
Okay, I got an idea. I gotta call it on time. There's a chap I can't wait to introduce you to. His name is Kim White, and he's an energy worker. And so everything that he's been working on for 3 decades is about energy and energy flow, blockages in people, all of these things. And he talks about the same thing where he can heal the energy flow of people and blockages over the phone, you know, and that flow of distance. So what you've just described there of Zoom, of that collective, even the power of placebo. My wife's reading Joe Dispenza's book, of
My favorite book,
the placebo
on the
effect.
placebo. Favorite book. Love that book. Yeah.
That to me, the reality of them sensing that feeling that, I'm receiving Julie's energy, I'm doing that, and it'll affect the body in the same way if I believe it. So this is super awesome stuff that I'm geeking out on, of all of these realms of where science and elements of things we may or may not understand, bits of spirituality, to help people live their best versions of themselves and to live in choice, to live in response, not reaction. And so my last question for you, Julie, when was the last time you did something for the first time, and what was it?
Oh, wow. Ooh, the last time for the first time. Probably, as I just looked out the window, I'm in Austin, Texas, and we're having a major rain, freeze, snowstorm right now. So the thing that I just went to immediately is yak tracking. So the first time that recently that I did yak tracking, if anybody doesn't know what yak tracking is, you just go to Amazon and look up yak tracks, and they're $20 and you put them over your hiking boots, and they're like little tire things that fit on the bottom of your feet, and you can walk through ice and snow much easier. You won't fall. And so my husband and I went and did some yak tracking and fell in love with it because we love to hike. But now we can hike in the snow. And we just got back from a vacation in New Mexico and Colorado just last week. And so yak tracking, that's the first thing that came to my mind with the snow on the ground in Austin, Texas.
Love it.
So if you haven't done yak tracking before, check it out.
Check it out.
Really fun. It's hiking in the snow, basically.
Thanks so much, Julie. It's part of my endeavor to help all people reconnect with their playful childlike state of where everything was new, everything was for the first time. And what tends to happen is we limit our experiences of things we do or don't like, and how often we go and do things for the first time. Even if something we've done many times, we can do it with new eyes. So it can be a variety of interpretations of the last time you did something for the first time. If we live a life like that, of curiosity, of wonder, that for me, I think is the gift that will keep us adaptable, keep us in this potential of comfortable in the uncomfortable. And so thank you, Julie. If people want to reach out to you, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best ways?
You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Julie Hutchinson, and I'll also give you my email address. It's julieh@core, C-O-R-E, performance.us, not .com, .us, julieh@coreperformance.us.
Awesome. We'll put those in the links on the podcast. It's been fantastic. I'll see if I can get Julie and maybe Kim. We'll do a 3-person part 2 podcast. That could be cool.
But got all kinds.
Thank you. It's been a real blessing. I've learnt loads. I've enjoyed it. And thank you for playing all out with us on Decoding AQ.
Thank you so much.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit aqai.io to gain your personalized report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQai assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams, and organizations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.